All right, let's talk about one of the most famous buildings in the world, Bran Castle in Romania. It's this amazing place where centuries of real, actual history have smashed right into a myth so powerful it's basically taken over the castle's identity. So let's peel back the layers and separate the legend from the landmark.
So this is the big question, isn't it? The million-dollar question. You see this castle and one name just immediately pops into your head, Dracula. But is that story actually true? Did the world's most famous vampire ever really stalk these halls? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out. Okay, first things first, let's just step into the legend itself. This is the castle that lives in our imagination, a place with those Gothic spires, deep, moonlit shadows. It's the setting that has fueled our nightmares and totally captured our fascination for more than 100 years.
And the location is absolutely key here. The castle sits at a literal crossroads between two old Romanian regions. On one side, you've got Transylvania, a land just dripping with spooky folklore, and on the other, Wallachia, which was the real-life kingdom of a super ruthless ruler. I mean, the geography itself is like the perfect recipe for a myth to grow. But okay, what happens when we pull back that spooky cloak of legend? What do we actually find underneath? Let's get into the castle's real documented history, because it tells a very different and maybe even more interesting story. And wow, this slide just lays out the disconnect perfectly. On one hand, the myth gives us this lair for the undead, right? A place of pure terror. But the reality? Bran Castle was a super important military fortress. It was a beloved home for royalty, and, get this, it was a hospital for heroes.
I mean, just look at its timeline. You can see what it was really for. It was born way back in the 14th century for military reasons, to defend this crucial mountain pass. It served kings and kingdoms for hundreds of years, and then it took on this completely new job during World War II.
This detail is just so powerful. Instead of some creature of the night, the most famous person living in the castle during that time was Princess Ileana of Romania. And she was a trained nurse who personally turned her own home into a safe haven, caring for wounded soldiers. Think about that. It was a place of healing, not horror.
So, if the castle doesn't really belong to Dracula, where on earth did the name even come from? Well, to get that, we have to meet the real guy whose name got forever tangled up with the vampire legend.
So, this is Vlad III, who you probably know as Vlad the Impaler. He was a very real and very feared prince in the 15th century. The name Dracula actually came from his dad, but it was his own incredibly brutal tactics that made that name infamous all across Europe.
Okay, so now we've got two pieces of the puzzle, a dramatic, spooky-looking castle and a terrifying historical ruler. But it actually took a third person to mix them all together and create this immortal legend. And that person was Bram Stoker. In 1897, this Irish author wrote a horror novel that would basically change pop culture forever. He needed a truly scary villain, and he found his inspiration in all these dark stories he'd read about the historical Vlad the Impaler.
So here it is, the crucial point. Stoker totally borrowed Vlad's scary reputation and his name for his vampire count, but there's zero evidence he even knew Bran Castle existed. In fact, the castle in his book is in a totally different part of Romania. The direct link that we all just assume is there, it's just not in the original story.
So how in the world did these three totally separate things, a castle, a real ruler, and a fictional book, get so tightly woven together that they're now inseparable in our minds?
This quote from our source material really just says it all. The connection wasn't made by historians. It was made by our imagination. The castle just looked the part. Its imposing shape, plus all these local rumors about Vlad maybe being in the area, it created this perfect storm where fact and fiction just got all blurred together.
So let's just break it down real quick. The myth sticks around because of this powerful mix of things. You've got the perfect Gothic look, the super evocative location, those lingering local rumors, and of course, the unstoppable cultural juggernaut that is Bram Stoker's novel. All that stuff together created a legend that's way, way more famous than the castle's real story. And all of this leaves us with one final thought. The story of Bran Castle kind of proves that sometimes we just prefer the myth. The tale of a vampire's lair is just so much more exciting than the story of a medieval tax fortress and a hospital. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it about a great story that makes it more powerful and sometimes more permanent than reality itself?